Welcome back to Conversations About Bookbinding, produced by Bookforge. Today we're diving into tomorrow's past, rebinding antiquarian books with modern sensibility with Kathy Abbott.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. You know, we often marvel at those stunning antique books in museums and collections, but have you ever stopped to think about how they've survived for centuries?
I guess I never really thought about that, but now that you mention it, it is pretty remarkable how they've stood the test of time.
Well, and especially given that many of those, like beautiful leather-bound volumes from the 19th century with their raised bands and all those intricate designs,
Yeah.
they're actually harming the very books they're meant to protect.
Really? I always thought those elaborate bindings were like the gold standard for preservation.
Well, they certainly look impressive, but the problem is that they were often bound too tightly. And that puts a lot of stress on those delicate pages and spines.
Oh,
It's kind of like putting a beautiful but ill-fitting corset on a delicate garment. It might look good, but it's ultimately causing damage.
Ah, that's a great analogy.
So yeah, those raised bands, they were often purely decorative, glued on rather than integrated into the structure of the book.
And I'm guessing that weakens the spine over time.
Exactly. The glue deteriorates, the pages become brittle, and the whole book suffers.
So what Kathy Abbott and this Tomorrow's Past collective are doing, they're really like challenging those long-held assumptions about how we preserve these historical treasures.
Yeah, they are. They're saying, let's respect the book's history, but let's not be beholden to outdated aesthetics that might actually be causing more harm than good.
And what I find fascinating is that their approach is actually inspired by much older binding techniques.
Oh, you mean like those simpler bindings using vellum or paper that Kathy observed often held up better in transit than their fancier counterparts?
Precisely. Those older, less flashy techniques, they've proven remarkably durable over time. So Tomorrow's Past kind of takes that historical wisdom, combines it with modern conservation practices, and even some, unexpected materials.
Okay, I have to ask about these materials. You mentioned carbon fiber and even gold staples. It seems almost sacrilegious to use something so modern on these antique books.
I know it might seem that way at first, but when you delve into their philosophy, it actually makes perfect sense. So take, for instance, Peter Jones. He's a member of Tomorrow's Past. He often incorporates carbon fiber rods into his bindings to provide what he calls perfect articulation.
Articulation. What does that even mean in terms of a book?
Well, it means that the book opens and lays flat effortlessly. The pages can move freely without strain, which not only enhances the reading experience, but also helps protect the book from further damage.
So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about respecting the book's functionality as well.
Exactly. And then you have someone like Shun Evad. She's developed this revolutionary staple binding technique using pure gold or platinum staples that she crafts herself.
Staples? That's incredible. It sounds incredibly lavish.
It is, but it's also incredibly functional. So the staples are attached to small pieces of wood or acrylic, and then the covers are weighted with carbon fiber rods to ensure they lie flat. It's this beautiful marriage of artistry and practicality where the materials themselves become part of the design.
So it sounds like this approach is really challenging our traditional notions of value and craftsmanship in bookbinding. It's not just about using expensive materials. It's about choosing the right materials for the job and using them in a way that's both beautiful and functional.
You've hit the nail on the head. Another great example is Carmen Oregi's croissant binding. It gets its name from these small crescent-shaped pieces on the spine. And the beauty of this binding is that it allows even large format books to open completely flat.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a dream for those oversized art books. Or books with illustrations that span across 2 pages. No more struggling to see the details in the gutter.
Exactly. It's all about respecting the book's content and making sure that it's accessible to the reader. Now, Kathy Abbott, she often uses kintsugi-inspired repairs in her work.
Kintsugi. That's the Japanese art of repairing pottery with goldrite, where the cracks become part of the beauty of the object.
You got it. She uses this technique to highlight imperfections in the book she's rebinding, sometimes using gold, sometimes a striking blue. Instead of trying to hide the flaws, she embraces them and makes them part of the story.
I love that. It's like saying this book has lived a life, and its imperfections are part of what makes it unique. Speaking of unique, what about that tiny dictionary Kathy mentioned? The one that can be turned inside out.
Oh, yes. That one is bound with vellum and uses a pack sewing technique that allows for incredible flexibility. It's a testament to the ingenuity of these bookbinders and their willingness to push the boundaries of what's possible.
So they're not just preserving these books, they're giving them a new life, a new voice, through these innovative bindings.
And in doing so, they're sparking a conversation about how we approach preservation in all areas, not just bookbinding. They faced a lot of resistance initially, especially from traditional bookbinding communities.
Oh, I can imagine. It's like challenging those deeply held beliefs about how things should be done.
Precisely. But as people started to grasp tomorrow's past's philosophy, their perception began to shift. Their work has evolved from being tucked away in corners at book fairs to being featured in prestigious galleries like the Aram Gallery. And they've even garnered attention at events like the Codex Book Fair.
Wow, that's quite a journey.
Yeah.
It really speaks volumes about the impact they've had on the world of bookbinding. But how has this philosophy influenced Kathy Abbott's own work?
Well, it permeates everything she does, from conservation to design binding, and even personal commissions. For instance, she once took on this commission for an embossed cloth binding, and she turned what are normally hidden spine folds into a beautiful design element.
Oh, wow, turning the hidden into a highlight. I love that. Any other examples?
Well, she also had a commission for a copy of Imitation of Christ, which had certain, shall we say, naughty bits underlined by a previous owner. And instead of trying to hide those markings, she incorporated them into the design, creating a sort of visual echo of those underlined passages. It's this playful nod to the book's unique history.
Oh, that's brilliant. These bindings sound absolutely incredible. But I have to ask, they must be incredibly expensive, right?
Well, it's actually more nuanced than that. While they might seem expensive at first glance, the time-intensive thinking involved actually makes them more affordable than traditional fine binding.
Oh, really? So they're not just slapping on fancy materials and calling it a day?
Definitely not. They're carefully considering every aspect of the binding, the book's history, its condition, its intended use, to ensure both beauty and longevity. And their use of often simple materials like vellum and paper actually contributes to their cost-effectiveness.
So it sounds like they're really challenging the notion that quality has to come with a sky-high price tag.
Absolutely. They're demonstrating that thoughtful design and careful execution can result in a beautiful, durable, and surprisingly affordable binding.
It really makes you think about all the ways we assign value to objects and how much of that is based on tradition or perceived scarcity.
What's fascinating here is how they're bridging the gap between conservation and creative expression. They're not just preserving these books, they're giving them a new life, a new voice through these innovative bindings.
And in doing so, they're sparking a conversation about how we approach preservation in all areas, not just bookbinding.
It raises an interesting question. What if we applied the same blend of respect for the past and forward-thinking vision to other creative fields, like architecture, fashion, even technology?
It's like they're saying, let's honor the past but not be beholden to it.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between preserving what's valuable and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So let's imagine for a moment that we apply this thinking to something like historic buildings. Instead of painstakingly recreating every detail exactly as it was, what if we incorporated modern materials and techniques to make them more sustainable or functional for contemporary use?
It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? We could have these beautiful historic structures that are also energy efficient, accessible, and adaptable to the needs of modern life.
It's like blending the charm of the old with the practicality of the new.
Precisely. And it's not just about buildings either. Imagine applying this approach to fashion, reinterpreting classic designs with modern materials or sustainable practices.
Ooh, like a vintage dress reimagined with recycled fabrics. Or a classic suit tailored for a more contemporary silhouette.
Exactly. It's about honoring the essence of the original, while infusing it with a fresh perspective. Or how about technology? Instead of constantly chasing the newest gadget, what if we focused on creating devices that are built to last? Devices that can be repaired and upgraded rather than discarded.
That's a great point. In a world of planned obsolescence, embracing a tomorrow's past mentality could really revolutionize how we approach sustainability and responsible consumption. Imagine if our electronics were designed with the same care and consideration as these antiquarian books, these beautifully crafted objects meant to be treasured and passed down through generations.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? It's a reminder that true value lies in craftsmanship, thoughtful design, and a deep understanding of the materials we use.
And maybe a little bit of gold leaf doesn't hurt either.
Perhaps a touch of gold is the perfect finishing touch, adding a bit of sparkle to the blend of old and new.
It's inspiring to think about how a group of bookbinders is sparking such a broader conversation.
It really highlights the power of creative thinking and the importance of challenging conventions.
Well, on that note, huge thanks to Kathy Abbott and the entire Tomorrow's Past collective for their incredible work.
They've given us a lot to ponder, haven't they?
They really have. So for our listeners, we encourage you to explore more about Tomorrow's Past. We've included links to their work in the show notes.
And as you go about your day, consider this. What if we all approached our own work, our creative endeavors, or even just the objects we value, with the same blend of respect for the past and a forward-thinking perspective?
How might that change the way we create, preserve, and appreciate the things that matter most?
Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying. Yeah, it really makes you think about how we define value, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, instead of just like marveling at the beauty of these unique bindings, I think what's even more interesting is the philosophy behind them. That's what really makes Tomorrow's Past so compelling.
Yeah, and it's a philosophy that goes way beyond just bookbinding, if you really think about it. Their approach could apply to so many other things. Things we're always struggling with. How do we preserve something? But also make it new and innovative.
So instead of thinking about preservation and innovation as like opposite ideas, Tomorrow's Past is showing us that they can actually work together.
Exactly. It's not about just copying the past. It's about understanding why something is valuable and then figuring out how to make it relevant for today.
Okay, I like that. So let's play with that idea for a second. We were talking about historic buildings earlier. What if instead of trying to recreate every little detail exactly as it was, we took that Tomorrow's Past approach?
I mean, imagine incorporating modern materials and technologies to make those buildings more sustainable. Or even just more functional for people today.
Yeah, we could have these beautiful historic buildings that are also energy efficient, accessible, and adaptable to whatever we need.
Exactly. It's like you said before, blending the charm of the old with what works today.
I like that.
And it doesn't have to stop with architecture. Think about fashion.
Yeah.
What about reimagining those classic designs, but with sustainable materials or a more modern silhouette?
Ooh, like a vintage dress made from recycled fabrics? Or like a classic suit but with a more modern fit.
Exactly, honoring the original, but with a fresh take. And what about technology? In a world that's obsessed with always having the newest gadget, what if we learn from Tomorrow's Past and focused on making devices that last?
Yeah, things that you can repair and upgrade instead of just throwing them away when a new model comes out.
Right, that's such an important point. We live in a world where things are designed to break, but this Tomorrow's Past idea, it could totally change how we think about sustainability and being responsible about what we consume.
It's like, what if our electronics were made with the same care and thought as these antique books?
Yeah, beautifully crafted, designed to be treasured, and passed down for generations.
It makes you think about what real value is. It's not just about having the newest thing.
It's about craftsmanship and thoughtful design and really understanding the materials you're working with.
And hey, maybe a little bit of gold leaf never hurt.
A touch of gold can really add a special something. It's like it brings the old and the new together.
It's really amazing to think about how a group of bookbinders can start such a big conversation.
It shows you the power of creative thinking, not being afraid to do things differently.
Absolutely. So big thanks to Kathy Abbott and everyone at Tomorrow's Past for their incredible work.
They've really given us a lot to think about.
They really have. And for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Tomorrow's Past, we've included links in the show notes.
It's worth checking out. Their work is really beautiful and thought-provoking.
I agree.
So as you go about your day, think about this. What if we all approached our work and the things we create and value with that same respect for the past, but also with a vision for the future?
It makes you wonder, how would that change how we do things and how we appreciate the things that are important to us?
Until next time. Keep those creative sparks flying.
It's really incredible how they've managed to tie in all these ideas about sustainability and being thoughtful about what we consume into something like bookbinding.
Yeah, it really shows you how connected everything is, doesn't it?
It does.
Like even something as specific as bookbinding can make you think about these bigger issues we're facing.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a good reminder that innovation, it's not just about coming up with something totally new. It's also about looking at what we already have and figuring out how to give it new value and new purpose.
Yeah, and how to make sure those things, whether it's an old book or a building or even clothes, how to make sure they still matter in the future.
Well said. It's been amazing having you on the show today. This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed talking about Tomorrow's Past. They're such an inspiration. I hope more people start thinking about these things.
Me too. And for our listeners, if you want to see what Tomorrow's Past is all about, You can find links to their work in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely check them out. Their bindings are just beautiful.
Right.
And so thought-provoking.
Absolutely. So until next time, everyone, keep those creative sparks flying. And remember, sometimes the best way to innovate is to look back at the past